Hey, peace everyone, this is Ilmatico. Um, the title of this video is Black Belt Magazine publishes an article on racism in martial arts, while Black Belt Magazine has been the chief contributor to racism in martial arts. So many of you may know me or be somewhat familiar with my articles. I am the individual who about a decade ago started a series of videos called Forgotten Fury, and I was interviewing prominent black martial artists. I wrote a 5-part article for the Amsterdam News in New York City. Um, Now, this all started way back in 2009. I was working for Kung Fu Cinema, the original Kung Fu Cinema, not that really bad site that's online now. And I wrote an article by a guy named Count Dante. I found out that there was racism in martial arts. So I spoke with Ronald Duncan, Vic Moore, and Kareem Abdullah, and Steve Muhammad at this time. And I spoke to Jun Rhee and Henry Cho. And I was also speaking to a number of other quote-unquote black martial artists. And in November, last month, they published an article called Black and White. And they're documenting or discussing racism in martial arts. The problem is that almost every single martial artist that I have spoken to over the last several years, as soon as we start discussing racism in martial arts and Black Belt Magazine comes up, they will immediately say that Black Belt Magazine is the core contributor to racism in martial arts. See, when I say there's racism in martial arts, I'm not talking about you go to a tournament and somebody calls you a nigger and you go home. That's not what I'm discussing. I'm talking about individuals like Moses Powell, Ronald Duncan, Vic Moore, Kareem Abdullah, all being neglected in the martial arts media. Black Belt Magazine would never give them any coverage. I had one prominent martial artist who passed away like within the last year or two. I'm not gonna say his name. He basically said right away Black Belt Magazine was the worst. And what happened was throughout like the 70s and 80s, whenever they did, they would have feature articles on prominent black martial artists. Don't get it twisted. But whenever they would put quote unquote black people on the cover, they were getting their asses kicked. People like Vic Moore or Kareem Abdullah were never given full coverage. Now here's something else. A decade ago, when I started working on this, I would go to Black Belt Magazine's website, and whenever I typed in Ronald Duncan's name, I would be directed to a page on their site with Stephen Hayes' books. I kid you not. All right? The racism is omitting people from history, not giving them their credit. I cannot believe that Black Belt Magazine, who contributed to racism in martial arts, had the audacity to write an article about racism in martial arts. And see, I think the way that they're going to get, in their mind, is they're getting past is that, well, after Ronald Duncan died, they did a write-up on him. Or after Ronald Duncan died, they have a picture honoring him. Ronald Duncan should have been on the cover of their magazine like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times. Moses Powell, Kareem Abdullah, Vic Moore, all these people, the Black Karate Federation, Steve Saunders, Steve Muhammad, as great as he is and was, should have been all over their quote-unquote black martial artists shouldn't have had to go and start to make their own magazines. Now, what these people did, this so-called writer of theirs, he wrote an article about so-called black martial artists, and he's seen my work. I'm not trying to plug myself, but many of you, a few years ago, I wrote an article that went viral. It was called 12 Black Martial Artists You Should Know About. It was featured on the Last Dragon fan site. It went viral. It was all over the web. And I put Shaka Zulu in this article, and I mentioned Shaka Zulu in another article. And the thing is that Shaka Zulu was never a fighter. He was not like a prominent tournament fighter or anything like that. I used Shaka Zulu just because I liked his backstory. And so they tripped up and went to, and in their article, they referred to almost every single person that I wrote about. Count Dante, Shaka. There's absolutely zero. There's 100 other black martial artists that are alive that they could have reached out to, and they went to Shaka Zulu, and basically copied the content from my article that was written in the Red Glow article. I wrote an article 2 years ago called "Masters of Forgotten Fury, Masters of the Red Glow." Um, and again, I'm not making this video to bring up a negative aspect of our traditional martial arts, but many of you know that I've been working on a documentary for several years, and in my documentary, I'm going to prove to you that Black Belt Magazine was involved in racism in martial arts and also intricately involved in the Bruce Lee agenda, where Vic Moore challenged Bruce Lee, and they messed up themselves, including their editor. They messed up themselves, and I'm going to prove that by omission and also by false reporting, they set up they were involved in a campaign to slander Vic Moore. All right.